is a fireside chat with Dheeraj Batra, who is a principal partner at the Innovation Realized practice at Ernst & Young and in the US. Our moderator for the same is Madanmohan Rao, who is the research director at YourStory. So over to you, Dheeraj.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this fireside chat. So please get your wines, your beers, your coffee cups, whatever. I want to first thank the organizers and all the speakers for setting the stage for this session. Today, we're going to be talking about innovating at scale, unicorns and beyond. Yesterday, we heard about design thinking, agile innovation inclusion. Today, we heard about corporate open innovation accelerators and how can large companies also sustain the innovation edge. So joining us today for this fireside chat, I'm honored and delighted to welcome Dheeraj Batra, Principal Partner at EY for the Innovation Realized practice. He was earlier a business designer at the legendary firm IDEO. He has served both at the corporate and startup ends of the spectrum with InnoSight Ventures, D Labs, Propel Labs, Arogya Finance, and Johnson & Johnson. So thanks so much for joining us, Dheeraj. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Pleasure
and he's joining us from the US. So what time is it in the morning there for you, Dheeraj? Are you up at 5 in the morning or something? Or
No. That would be on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast, so it's 9:30. Not bad.
Oh, okay, good. So I don't feel so guilty anymore. Okay, so Dheeraj, let's set the stage now. We're hearing a lot about scale and big companies and startups working together. We've had a phenomenal week in India. We had about 6 unicorns in 4 days. We also have a very not so phenomenal week with the COVID second wave coming again. So we need to talk about creativity and resilience at the same time. Let's pick with the first one. What are some of your thoughts on how should a company sustain its creative edge as it scales?
Madan, first of all, thank you. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to join you here. Thank you to the organizers. It's been an amazing event so far and an honor to be here. Now, Madan, to your question, right? If I reflect on it, I think the first hurdle we should cross over is just acknowledging that, yes, it can be done. Right? I think if you look around, it started with, and then especially if you look on the technology side of things, right? I mean, there are a lot of companies that are very big, not only in terms of the usual technology measure of how many people they reach, but in terms of employees, in terms of revenues, in terms of the impact they're having. And it's not just one. I mean, back in the day, there was just Microsoft and Apple, and then just Microsoft and then Apple again. But now you look around and that list is getting bigger and bigger and longer and longer. So I think that's the first thing you should acknowledge, that, hey, it can be done. It's no longer just a theoretical conversation that academics have, or some people write about, or some people talk on a panel about, right? It's actually doable. Secondly, and I was reflecting on this topic, Madan, after we spoke about it initially, and a friend of mine had a metaphor which really spoke to me, right? He said, it's in a way, it's about how do you retain some of the childish curiosity and excitement and boldness as you grow up. And I really like that, right? It's not about how you remain a child as you grow up, because that's probably not a good idea. You need judgment. You need to be able to learn from the experiences you have. But I like that framing. And I think that, to me, that sums it up really well.
Thanks, Dheeraj. One way many companies try to stay innovative is by having some kind of an idea management system or an intrapreneurship kind of a network, or they tie up with the startups through accelerators and so on. What are some ways in which you've seen idea management systems perform in companies during the pandemic and even earlier? Dheeraj?
Honestly, not that well. Right? I mean, I think on the one side, look, they're very good at sucking up ideas. They're very good. They're a good way to source ideas. Like, you send it out, and if you have enough employees, if you send it out to 10,000 people, 1,000 will reply, 500 will reply with something they've really thought about. So you can get some sort of quantity there. But then it usually falls off after that, right? Because there's usually no sort of real thinking behind, okay, once we do this PR campaign of an idea management platform, what happens after that? And I think, you only get a few shots at that as a company. You do it 1 year and you don't do anything with the ideas that come up, or you don't go back to the people who had ideas, even if they weren't good, they didn't get feedback on their ideas, or why they weren't selected, they just weren't selected. And then, the top 5 ideas, how much funding did they get? Were they processed? Were they pushed forward? Were they processed through the system? And I think, you as a large company, get a few shots at that. You do it once, you don't do anything about it. People say, okay, I'll give you another chance. You do it again, by the third or fourth time, I think your employees start getting cynical. So honestly, I think if it's just that idea platform without everything that surrounds it, in my experience, I haven't seen that work too well over the long run. I think it's really about surrounding it with everything else, where you're showing the seriousness as a company. And I think, if you take a step back, I think it's probably more about, so let's take an example, right, of a company that's doing this really well, and it's now a giant, Amazon, right? You really look at them, and if you go back to one of the initial letters to investors in 1997, Jeff Bezos laid some principles out. I think every company's laid principles like that out at one point or another. I think every startup founder has laid those out, but they stuck with it, right? He said, look, we'll become customer obsessed. And that stayed true. He said, we'll focus on only hiring the best talent. We will never compromise. And that stayed true. We'll always act with urgency. We'll prioritize the long run over the short run. You go through that list. And it's very easy to eye roll if you read something like that. But I think the other element then is, can you stand behind something like that? Right. So in addition to an idea management platform, I think it really is about saying, okay, look, it is that. But then if you win, we're going to do these things with it. And it's going to have other cultural impacts on it. And I think that's what these companies that have successfully scaled, I think, have done. Scaled and retain their innovation capabilities. I think that's what they've done. They've laid these values out, they've laid these principles out, and then stuck with it.
Thanks, Dheeraj. As you pointed out earlier, one part of scale definitely is how to keep that culture of creativity, keep that childlike spirit in you alive. The second part is process. You talked about idea management just now. The third part is leadership. So one way organizations scale is by keep building the next wave and the next wave of leaders, of innovators, of execution, etc. So what are some ways you've seen in which successful, innovative companies have built the next wave of leaders? And what could people in the audience do to learn from these kinds of examples of building the next wave of innovative leaders? Dheeraj?
Yeah, I really do think it comes down to that. It's there's the 2 points you just mentioned, right? I really think it's about what values do you have, what culture do you have, and can you really retain your focus on that, right? It's not about, as you're growing, you let the growth and specifically the people growth get ahead of who you are as a company and what you want to be. No, I think you always focus on getting the right people, giving them the right roles. And then leading with your values, right? So if you do have values around customer obsession and you want to retain that innovativeness, if you call it, as you grow as a company, and then you want the next layer to also have that customer obsession, but you want that next layer to also focus more on the long term than the short run. So I think it really is about what are those fundamental truths that you want, and hire on the basis of that and make decisions on the basis of that. So it shouldn't be around, the number of degrees you have, or the number of places you worked at, or what your LinkedIn said about, because you looked around, or there's, people with, and I'm one of them, right, which says X this, X this, X this, X this, X this. That's great, right? But that's not enough. It's, can you come in and can you actually perform at the level we need you to? Can you live up to the values? Because otherwise the company starts going in the wrong direction at the wrong time, and then you can't scale as you want to.
Thanks, Dheeraj. One of the other questions that connects to this whole thing is failure. How should companies learn from failure and then move ahead? Now, it's very easy to say fail fast, learn fast, etc. But failure can have some emotional stress on people. It leads to loss of confidence in some cases, etc. And yet, without failure, you can't go ahead. And as companies like Amazon have said, the bigger a game you play, the bigger the failures you have to deal with and learn from. So, Dheeraj, how does one deal with failure at scale and somehow bounce back and go ahead? Any advice you can give for our entrepreneurs in the audience, Dheeraj?
That's a wonderful question. And look, you're right. I think a lot of companies do pay lip service to those things. Fail fast, fail quickly. It's better to fail quickly than than try something for a while. And I think it's about a balance. Because while failure needs to be tolerated, I think you have to come back, you have to pull back on it a bit and then really think about what caused the failure. Right. I mean, if it was around effort or competence, that probably shouldn't be tolerated. Right. If it's, you really had a hypothesis, you really put your head down and went after something, and you tried as hard as you could for as long as made sense and still failed. I mean, that's different. And I think that unless you have that nuance in there, then it starts with lip service. You may try it, but then you're like, we're not getting anything out of failure because people are failing for the wrong reason. Then you're letting them come back into the system for the wrong reasons. But again, I mean, if you go to the big companies that we just keep talking about, right, the Google of the world, the Amazon of the world, they do tolerate failure, but I don't think they tolerate incompetence in any way or lack of effort in any way. If that's what's causing the failure, I think you're quickly rooted out and shown the door. And then I think that's fair.
That's a good distinction to make there, Dheeraj, between making an honest attempt and then failing versus failing because you were incompetent or did not prepare well enough.
Yeah.
And that's a very important distinction for our audience to make. Now, Dheeraj, we're having this whole event online, as compared to being in the same room and meeting each other over coffee breaks and so on. So hybrid has become the big buzzword now. And a big challenge for many companies is how do you keep that culture when new employees are joining their company, but they never met each other? There's no water cooler conversations. There's no beer and kebabs after work. There's no TGIF, etc. So in this hybrid kind of a situation, how do companies sustain that camaraderie and the energy that are required for high performance and high scale innovation? Dheeraj?
Honestly, Madan, I don't have an answer for that. I know. Look, will be very honest with you. Right? We're struggling with that too. I'm struggling with that because I think it's, on the one hand, you want to give people the freedom to work from home and do all of these things, but you're right. You can't develop that camaraderie from a distance, and especially for a high-performing team where, what you really need is a team of 4 or 5 people working on, the next big thing for you, the team of 20, 30 people working on the next big thing for you. Some of them should be able to finish each other's sentences, right? I mean, that's how you make 1 + 1 = 3 and your 2 + 2 = 5. And I think to do that, you have to get closer to each other. So I think, while, the pandemic has forced us into this, I can't imagine it being the way forward. Hybrid makes sense, right? You give people more flexibility. You've shown, you may not need swanky offices that are completely full, may not require everybody to fight through traffic to get to work every day. Fair. But I do think you will need those touch points. I think without that, it's going to be very difficult. I mean, some of the closest friends that I still have professionally, personally, came from those experiences, right, where you went through ridiculously difficult experiences together. You fought, you yelled at each other, but then you made up, and now you trust each other. I can't see doing that online while your internet's breaking up, and as you get older, your kids walk through, right, and the power goes out. I mean, it's just so. Look, I'm struggling with that too, but intuitively, I don't think you can build some of those things if you're not in person. I think we are social animals for a reason.
That's right, Dheeraj. We have to deal with the challenges and somehow find ways to improvise and even do some hacks, jugaad around this whole online method. My last couple of questions for you, Dheeraj, are more about resilience now. We're living in a period of unbelievable uncertainty. In India, for example, we have a second wave coming, and it's shocking the way it's moving, the speed, the way it's bringing back all the memories of what we should have overcome from last year. But we're back again. Other countries are going to the third wave, the third lockdown, and so on. And no one has any kind of idea about how long we're going to come back to the new normal, the new abnormal, whatever it is. So what are some of your thoughts on how to deal with uncertainty? How should one plan? How should one respond? How to build agility into oneself, a team, and a company? Dheeraj?
Look, I think how to do it is, my answer would probably be practice, right? I think if you've gone through it a few times, you've learned to learn. You've learned to take stop and say, what, if this happens again, let me do these 2-3 things differently. And I think then, what's interesting is actually you can probably abstract that out, right? So as individuals, we do that, right? We were cooking, you cut your hand with a knife. The next time you're more careful. If you do it twice, you're even more careful. You may stop using that knife or stop cooking altogether, right? And maybe that's the right conclusion for you. And I think you keep abstracting that out, right? So it's true for individuals. I think it's true for families. I think it's true for companies. And honestly, I think it's true for countries as well, right? That we should at some point be learning from our mistakes. But I think unfortunately, we don't seem to be. Right? Because of all these waves that I think we've made some changes, probably not enough. And I think there's probably some questions that we should be asking ourselves at a much, much higher level than at least my pay grade, right? About what we should be learning as a society, as a company, as a country, and all countries, as a world, to handle the next one better. Yeah, but I think it comes from experience and learning and just reflection on what you've seen, what should you learn, what should you do differently next time. And I think it probably applies every just on up, from the individual, the family, the company, to societies, to countries. You're on mute, Madan.
Learn and reflect. Those are good pieces of advice there, Dheeraj. Yes, I keep forgetting who's on mute and who's not on mute. Dheeraj, the previous couple of panels talked about the India advantage. Why is India so important now? We've heard so many companies around the world coming to set up accelerators in India. So you've got a global view. You're sitting at EY. You're sitting in the US right now. How does the world look at India right now, and what do you see as India's moment in this time of crisis, and how India can innovate and help other companies pull up their own fortunes? Dheeraj?
Yeah, so I'm a bit surprised that India's not responding as well as I thought it would, because it's a very resilient society, right? I mean, people think about entrepreneurs. I mean, I spent over a decade in India, some neighboring countries before coming back to the US. I think every other person in India is an entrepreneur, right? But that's very unique. Right, where most people, most countries end up working in, quote unquote, the formalized society. You have a job, you have a title, you have an office. Most people in India are entrepreneurs to this day, right? Whether it's the food cart vendor, whether it's the pani puri guy, whether it's the auto rickshaw driver, whether it's your maid, the farmer, and they've learned resilience, obviously, right? Because none of them have this security of getting a paycheck and getting insurance from somebody else and getting social benefits and having a resume and somebody else coming and hiring them. No, they have to do all this on their own. And I think that's what's been attracting the world to India. It is that mindset, because it's really deeply ingrained to say, what, we'll figure it out. We're resilient, we'll bounce back. We're self-reliant, we'll figure it out. So that was kind of surprising that, there's now another wave of COVID taking over, because I would think that we would have responded better than other countries. I was very confident. That said, look, I mean, you asked the question. I think that's why people are coming, and I think this is our opportunity where we show the right talent. We show them that it's not just about resilience, but the talent and the thinking and the creativity and then the systems around us, which let us leapfrog traditional business models to create the next big thing. I think that's our opportunity to do that now. And I think it'll only increase, by the way. I think the world over, I've been having a lot of conversations with my clients here, both as EY, as independent, the work that I'm doing now, the startups that I work with. And I keep referring them to that part of the world, to India, to say, look, it's just natural there. You talk about creating innovative culture in your company, go there on any street, you'll be surrounded by entrepreneurs, right? And that's very unique.
Very well said, Dheeraj. I think that's one of the aims of this conference, to unleash more of this entrepreneurial energy. Before we sign off, can you share with us some of the work you're doing in this space, and maybe how can the audience connect with you, some of EY's work in this space? You're an innovation leader in this practice. So for our audience, can you share with us some of the projects, maybe initiatives you're taking on, and how they can learn more about what EY is doing in this space? Dheeraj?
Yeah, sure. Look, EY is a global company. And if any of your colleagues do want to get in touch, I can help connect them here. I can help connect them in India and other countries as well. Like most companies, I think EY is trying to figure it out. I think most of these companies, most companies out there, I think everybody's still trying to figure out how exactly do you do this at scale. Because they're all multi-billion-dollar companies, global companies, so they have a core business, which is to sell more services, sell more projects, do more, hire more, compete with their initial competitive set. But I think they're all trying to figure out how to take that next step. And honestly, I think the door would be open to these companies, because they have as much to learn as to teach around what they need to be doing better. And I think they're all open-minded. I do a lot of work in healthcare, life sciences. And to the last one, they're all just really, really curious. And this COVID situation really, really brought that to the fore. So when the lockdown first happened, at least in the US, everything shut down for a few weeks. And then within a few weeks, everything opened back up again with these companies, because they realized they're at the forefront of this. They have to get patients in, diagnosed, vaccinated. The pharma companies had to figure out, completely new business models and how they sell what they have, how they develop vaccines, how they distribute them, how they do this at scale, at speed, in a distributed manner, without being able to fly over scientists from one location to the other. And I think they were all looking for lessons from everyone. And I think that's the posture, the audience should be taking, is that they have as much to offer as to learn. Because I think that's true.
That's a great invitation to collaborate, Dheeraj. Thanks. Before we wrap up, would you like to share maybe what's on your reading list these days? What are some personal hacks you have to stay fit and alert and not depressed in this unending pandemic era? Any things you want to share from your personal side, Dheeraj?
Yeah. Look, I don't know if I'd call it a hack, but I think the biggest thing that gives me energy is my family. So when the lockdown started, I had an office in our house, and I quickly got kicked out because my wife needed the office. Then I went to another room and I got kicked out of there because my kids needed that to homeschool. So I ended up on the kitchen table. But it's okay, right? I mean, I think that's where I got my energy, is just being around them, just being able to have them as a support network and me be their support. You're talking about a reading list. I wish I'd gotten through half of it. So my wife's a business school professor here in the US. So she reads a lot and she keeps giving me recommendations. All these books that you see behind me are 90% are hers, and half of them have a post-it on there for me to read. I'm hoping to get to it sometime. But yeah, I think there's you can never read enough. There's a nice podcast that I like so there's a radio station in the US called NPR, National Public Radio. It's supposed to be an unbiased source of information. So they have this program called How I Built This for entrepreneurs. And it's one of my favorites. It's really about entrepreneurs, different leaders, and how they build what they have. When I get a chance, when I get some downtime, I try to listen to that.
Thanks, Dheeraj. Those are some good resources. I thought I would share a couple of books for our audience. One is a book called The Creative Curve by Alex Gannett. It's a very good book on not just the technology sector, but also music, arts, creative crafts, and so on. More from an Indian angle, there's this good book called Design Your Thinking by Pawan Soni. And this is about how design and design thinking can be used not just at startup stage, but also at scale stage for an organizations. So I hope this weekend gives you some good time to read. Thanks once again, Dheeraj, for your very good insights, hard-earned lessons from the startup and corporate side of the experience. And with that, thanks to the audience, the sponsors, and the organizers. Back to you now, Smita.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dheeraj.